All right, on today's episode of Locked On Avalanche, we have a very special guest for everybody. Geo Collins joins us, and she has a video of her own on her YouTube channel on how the NHL can grow the sport, and she dips into her history with esports. Will it work for the NHL? All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Avalanche.
You're Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Chris Maselli. By myself today, no Kyle Sullivan with me. Some technical issues at the Sullivan household. So it's just
going to be here.
Yeah. So just me. And like I said in the opening, Geo Collins is joining us today. So thank you for tuning in and making it your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. And the reason why Geo is on this show is I came across, I don't even know, I think it was just the random algorithm from YouTube, which is basically all hockey stuff on my end. And your video showed up and the title just, it's something that Kyle and I have talked about many times in the past of just ways to grow the sport. So clicked on it and I've watched it like 3 or 4 times now because I just thought it was well done and well informed. And where you come from is, like I said in the beginning, is like an esports background. So we'll get into everything that you said in the video. But I want to give you a minute to just tell our viewers and listeners who you are, that background you have, and how you got into hockey.
Yeah, so I'm Geo, as you introduced me. I've worked in esports for the last 5 years, I guess, as broadcast talent. So I've mostly been a color commentator, but I've worked in every role. So I've been on the desk, done all commentating, I've hosted, I've done all of this stuff. And obviously esports being what it is, like professional competitive video gaming, there is a very big blurred line between the sport and kind of like the content side of things, which is where kind of this unique perspective comes from, I think. How did I get into hockey? I mean, obviously there's probably going to be people listening to this who are like, this girl ain't from North America, which is very true. And hockey is not a huge sport in the UK. It was actually during COVID. And I just really wanted something to, like, I was feeling miserable, like anyone was. Right. I had like a number of friends who were hockey fans, and there wasn't really like a sport that I followed. I've never really followed a team sport. A lot of people are like, aren't you a soccer fan? I'm like, no. Outside of the World Cup, like, no, I don't come from a family that's interested in soccer. So I kind of like the idea of it because it seemed, it was like fast paced. And also I've always been a skater. Like ever since I was like quite young. And so I was like, well, it kind of combines something I'm already interested in. So I just started watching, I don't know, I think it was like bits from the previous year's playoffs. And yeah, I got like really engaged with it. I kind of went in with an open mind. I didn't have like a predisposed idea of what team I was gonna like or anything like that. I was just like, cool, I'm just gonna like see how it is. And yeah, I just got really engaged in it. And
before we hit record, you said your team was
my team is the Vancouver Canucks.
And you had a blank slate of teams to pick from. What led you to?
It's tragic, isn't it? Yeah, it was the fact, so I actually like enjoyed watching them play. One thing I will say is I've never been a Glory supporter. So I've never been someone who's really like necessarily looks at something and goes, they're the best team, therefore I like them. For me, it's always like, is there just something about the way that they play that kind of takes my interest? Do I find it like fun to watch? But also like personalities on the team as well. Like I became a pretty big fan of like Brock Besser quite quickly. I thought he was quite funny. I really loved Bo Horvat, rest in peace. And I just thought like there was like, I don't know, I thought they were kind of like appealing just from that perspective.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Like there were some teams that I watched and I was like, oh, I don't really like vibe with these. I had a bias towards the Pacific Division anyway, because I spend a lot of time in California.
Mhm.
So I was already like, okay, I have like a connection to the West Coast. So I wanted to kind of be looking at teams from around that area. And the
Okay.
games that I was watching were predominantly from those sorts of teams as well. So there were some teams who I was probably just never going to have the same exposure to,
Right.
purely from that perspective as well. But yeah.
That's like the best of both. I mean, you're on the West Coast when you're here, and you pick
Mhm.
the Canadian team, so it's like it kind of
Exactly.
makes sense. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, like, you're relatively new viewer to the sport,
Mm.
and you recognized the issues that they have in reaching a broader audience.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to bring in, your video, which I will link in the show note. I put it up on Twitter, but if you don't follow on there, it's in the show notes of this episode below. Definitely implore you guys to watch it. Really cool take on how to kind of implement esports and kind of what they've done. Because basically,
Mhm.
like the crowd that you're going for in the video is basically like the younger generation, right? Like it's basically like the Gen Z crowd and how to reach them and how esports has done it. But do you think it's a little bit easier for like esports to reach that crowd because that's kind of it's like baked in
Oh
is
yeah,
the youth,
100%.
right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, because like that is sort of the natural um market in esports,
Right.
so like that kind of makes sense. But I think that's why it's all the more important in traditional sports, because the way that sports has been proliferated over the generations has been that natural kind, especially when you're looking at big team sports. So over here it'd be soccer, over there you've got your big four sports, where it's kind of like, oh, like my dad was a fan of this and I grew up watching that, and we would go to the home games in my city and we would go see this, and this is like my team in my city and stuff like that. And I think with like the advent of kind of the internet and how content, social media and stuff like that is, and also how people develop interests in things, where they develop fandom, and with the rising popularity of video games and accessibility of video games, like I think there is an interruption in that flow, the
Mhm.
generational flow that's happened for all of these years in traditional sports. It probably also doesn't help that, like, I think if you were to compare the percentage of kids who play sports throughout their childhood versus the percentage of kids who just sit in their bedroom playing video games as well, like that
Mhm.
has also probably had like a big change too. And also, and this is like, I think one of the big things that I spoke about, or at least have always felt about, is that the way that it's consumed is just antiquated at this point. You have these huge TV deals and you have to pay for them. And even then you have the, I always forget like the blackouts where, like,
Ugh,
if I live on the East Coast and I want to watch like a team
yeah.
on the West Coast, like I can't watch that. But if I want to watch an esports tournament, it doesn't matter where in the world I am. And I'd also don't have to pay for it. Which that is a whole other thing in and of itself and not necessarily a good thing, but that is what it has been up until this point. And that's extremely accessible. I can sit down in my bedroom on my PC. I can be in a Discord call with people. It's not like only in specific places and under specific circumstances can I consume this product like it is with sports. And people are always going to gravitate towards things that are more accessible and easier for them, because the more steps that there are to achieve something, the less likely people are to carry out all of those steps, especially if they are not an established viewer. Like if you're already a fan of hockey, then yeah, you're probably going to go through those steps because you know that the reward for it is something you're already interested in. But
Mhm.
if you're looking at trying to bring in new people, that is just going to put people off because they don't know that they're going to like it. They're just going to be like, I just won't bother then because I can just
Right.
open Twitch and watch whatever the hell. And there are
Right.
sports that have even like tacked onto that. The NWSL does it. They broadcast like not all of their games on Twitch, but some of them. And that's actually been a really fast-growing league in the US, and has been doing really well from that regard. And they seem to kind of have that right idea. And that's kind of where that difference lies.
Yeah, I mean, here, like with the regional sports networks and stuff like that, yeah, if you're not in that region, the only way to get it is if you get a subscription to ESPN Plus or anything like that. So you have to go outside, spend extra money to go get it, rather than like having, with streaming and stuff like that. You would really think by now they would really open it up to kind of like an a la carte type of thing. Like, hey, if you're,
Yeah.
with Avalanche, their games are broadcast on the Altitude Network.
Mhm.
To live anywhere else and just say like, hey, even though I'm on the East Coast, I'm an Avalanche fan. Why can't I add the Altitude Network to my sports package?
Mhm.
To not be there now is I don't get it. Like we're in this technological age and we still can't do that. If it's all just because of collective bargaining agreements and things like that, then on the next collective bargaining agreements, change that. It's
Yeah.
got to change in some capacity. And right now, I don't know if you heard this, but the Vegas Golden Knights just announced, and they made this big deal about it. And then when you really look into it, it's not that big of a deal. They released a new like app, and it's basically like you can get where whatever they broadcast on, it's now on your phone, but it's still only available to the people in that region. So it's like, so what? You just took what's available on TV and put it on a cell phone,
Yeah.
and it's not available to people outside of that region.
Yeah.
So it's
That's not
not that big of a deal.
revolutionary.
I don't know. It's not. But people who listen to this show every day know that if there's a team that I hate more than any, it's Vegas. So for them to think that they did something like,
Casual.
inventing the wheel and you didn't, I'm gonna call you out on that. A lot more to get to with Geo, but first we have to talk about FanDuel really quick, and you can snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Do you have a football team, Gio?
I like to say that I'm a Chargers fan, but I don't know tons about football, so.
I mean, so you're on an Avalanche podcast and you like the Vancouver Canucks and the Chargers. So obviously we have Bronco fans here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. So right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets. That's guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over and unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. All right, so we talked about the blackouts, both in agreement that they're stupid, but I don't see that ending anytime soon. You started your video with kind of talking about like promoting storylines a little bit better with the NHL, and that's true. Like the NHL, they will have their like superstars, and they'll kind of promote them, but it's singular. It's just that. It's just, hey, Connor McDavid's playing Wednesday night. Austin Matthews.
That's the exact person I straight went to when you said that they have the superstars. I'm like, oh, how many times have I heard about Connor McDavid?
And I get it. Like he's the cash cow. Like he is. You need to promote him. But so when you say storylines, I think maybe the American sport fan immediately goes to like, okay, who's at each other's throat? That's a storyline. I want to. Right. So, but how do you promote that? Like, do you feel like is that something that if it's promoted? Maybe like the parents of the world will see that and be like, I don't want my kids watching that.
Oh my God, that is the most.
Hey, because
of the time comment you could have made.
Right? Right.
What will the parents think? I don't care what the parents think. I mean, it's interesting because I've obviously come at this from the perspective of someone who works on broadcast. So it is my job to curate those storylines and to convey them on broadcast. And it is one thing, like you have really technically amazing broadcast talent in traditional sports. It's not just hockey, it's any of them. But for example, if I'm watching like a desk, I'll tell you what, the only desk, like with the analyst, you got your host, that I've ever like really loved in hockey is the Oilers one. Their TSM one that they have, where I've actually thought that the personalities that they have on there and the way they talk about people doesn't put me to sleep.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that, you know, I'm coming from the perspective that I know how we do it in esports, and there are lots of very intuitive ways that we go about things. And there's a lot more of, you really try to blur the line between the, you know, the broadcast and the audience, because you want the audience to feel like they're a part of it. They're a part of these stories and they're a part of everything. And there is a lot more personality that's in, you know, brought out in our broadcast, because you're not kind of coming at it from this perspective of like, we are the broadcast talent, we have to be super professional and serious and stuff like that. It used to be like that, and then they realized it didn't work. And it's not that it's about the broadcast talent, but it's about the fact that when you have this kind of like looser, more, for lack of a better term, more parasocial kind of like situation where like you want to come across like you are essentially friends with the viewer, and you can talk more openly about these players. And I think that sometimes I watch a desk, and obviously they're highly analytical, which is fine, and that is what an audience wants. But there is ways to combine that with talking about like the actual stories and stuff like that. And so yeah, it's not just like, yeah, this player costs this much per year, and they're the one who's going to win for us and stuff. It's like, okay, well, you've got like 20 to 30 people on this team, right? Like, what about everybody else? Like, what is a running theme of something over the last, I don't know, let's say like 10 games? Like, who has really been like doing better than usual? Okay, we're going to be playing this team today. You know, what's that kind of like historical rivalry, or what have these? So for actually a really good example from last season that, I mean, I might have mentioned it in that video, I don't remember because I didn't watch it back, but I might have mentioned it. But a really, really good example was the whole the very first game of the season that Vancouver and Seattle played against each other, and there was the woman who was in the audience cheering the Kraken, who then spotted a melanoma on the neck of the equipment manager of Vancouver, managed to like warn him, whatever. He went to hospital. Turns out she was right. And there was this whole thing that was like, oh my God, like you saved my life. And then like she came back, they were reunited, and it was like really cute. And also both of the teams put money together to help pay for her medical schooling, because that she's a medical student. And then there was this whole meme that was like, well, we started this season expecting these two teams to be like massive rivals, and now they can't be. They can't be. It's too wholesome, right? And it's like, that was a good story. That wasn't even about the players. But the way that it was conveyed and the way that it was kind of like shown was like, this is something that makes you feel emotionally engaged with what is happening with these teams. It actually doesn't matter who you're a fan of. Like, obviously for me, as a Canucks fan, like I saw it because it, you know, it's all over my social media and stuff. But like, that was something that I think everybody could look at that and be like, wow, I actually feel engaged with that. And so it's just like, that was actually done really well. And it's stuff like that. It's the reminder that like sport fundamentally is based on human emotion.
Sure.
Right? Like the desire for competition, the desire to win, the dedication that you put in to get there, the hurdles you have to overcome in the process. I mean, this is one of the most aggressive and physical sports that there is. There's obviously injuries all the time. That's like the easiest thing to suck emotion out of, right? And you know, and you have like really young guys who are obviously involved, and there are some players who go on to play well into their 30s and stuff, which is obviously old by the standards of professional sports, and everything going on through that. And I just think like, you got to remember that it's not just about like who hit puck best. It's like, these are real human beings, like who go through all sorts of different backgrounds and all sorts of things. And when they come up against each other, they have all of these different interactions. You get old teammates who used to play with each other for a really long time who end up playing against each other, and it's like wholesome. I mean, I always felt that when you'd see Corey Perry and Getzlaff like come back together to face each other after spending like 12 years, something stupid like that. with each other on the same team. Like, there's so many opportunities for that, but that needs to be, there is a responsibility of the broadcast to be selling that story. Like, there's so much that happens in these games and happens across the league that the job of the people on the broadcast is to frame that into something that anyone, whether they're an old fan, whether they're a newcomer, can digest as something that they can be invested in from the word go. And that's where I've always found it a little drier. And it's not even just about the live broadcast, but also ancillary content, which is kind of one of the other big things that I spoke about, is like, you have to use the opportunity to do that. And obviously the teams themselves do a lot of content, and I think some of them are really getting there. And sometimes you see a piece of content that's great, but I think content that shows the personalities of the players really well. I mean, that's one thing that I love that the Ducks did when Zegras joined, and it does help that he's a very marketable player because of his personality, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes players aren't as marketable, and sometimes they are. But like, that was something that they kind of really like landed on a goldmine with, but they also knew how to exploit that, like to use that and make like funny stuff with him in. Like, I look at people like, even players that people love to hate, like Evander Kane, like, use him for content, man. Like, because people hate him.
Yeah.
But he loves it. You know, he loves it, right? And it's like, you can turn people into villains. Like, villains are great. People, like, that's why you watch cartoons when you're a kid, and it's why you watch superhero movies and stuff like that, because everyone wants these different figures. And in sport, which is just such a fundamental way of like expressing those really base human feelings, like, yes, you want your heroes and villains, of course you do. And yeah, I just feel like it's a waste to not do that, and you're going to end up losing potential audience and potential fans to something else because you haven't done a good enough job of actually framing everything like that.
It's true. And with hockey, and really with all sports, like that, it's kind of changed from being a fan of, like, for the younger crowd, obviously, like, of being a fan of the team and being a fan of individual players. That's always been the case. Like, people are always fans of individual players, you know what I mean? But now it's so with like, you know, social media and just being able to follow these guys, that's what fans want. And the NHL, I think, holds on too much to their history with, like, you know, the original six and it being team based, which I love. And that's more where I'm at. Yeah. But I totally understand the, hey, wherever, you know, like the superstars are, that's where people are going to watch. And that's, it's true. Like, yeah, you're 100% right with the villain aspect of it. And remember a couple of years ago when Tom Wilson really was at he was under the skin of the New York Rangers, and he had that fight with Artemi Panarin, and they knew they were playing in like another couple days, and they knew that was going to get ugly. And it did. And if you're like, the first 2 minutes of the game, the penalty boxes were loaded because it was just fight after fight after fight. And it's so like people were tuning in for that because they saw. So yeah, like, but I don't know if the league really wants that. I don't know if the league wants to see, like, that's the negative side of the sport, and we don't want to promote that too much. There was no way to stop that.
Yeah,
that was going to happen.
No, and I understand that, but like, I'm also sort of the opinion it's like, you know, if you wanted a sport that you can just like play in church every Sunday, hockey wasn't the sport to work in.
Exactly.
Know? Like, and I'm definitely on board with the idea that there needs to be limitations on that. Like, I'm not all about like, yeah, just let the players just beat each other up until that one of them's knocked out on the ice and we just let them bleed out. Like, definitely there has to be a limit to what is allowed. Like, yes, give people penalties for inciting violence, but if that's the choice they want to make, you know,
it's part of the game, right?
Exactly.
Right. There was a graphic that you showed that was really like eye-catching, and it was that graphic about the percentages of Gen Z that are watching whichever sport, and compared to everybody else. Basically, like, I looked at it as like compared to their parents, like. This is what like everybody else is watching.
Scrub through and find
percentage wise, compared to what Gen Z is watching. And hockey was at the bottom of that list at
Mm.
20, I think it was like 23%, maybe it was 25%. It was low.
Oh,
The
here we go.
only thing that was lower than it was the WNBA.
Oh yeah.
So that is a problem. And all of this stuff that we're talking about is how do you reach them? You got a long way to go. This is not like where you're like in the middle somewhere and you make a couple adjustments and you can reach them. Now, I don't know if you remember, they hired, and this was in like 2021, this social media influencer, Josh Richards. I don't know who he is. I don't know if you've ever heard of him before. Apparently he's like a TikToker or something like that.
Okay.
And the NHL hired him to do exactly maybe a lot of this stuff that to reach that younger crowd.
Mhm.
And then just, I think, like COVID was already a thing, but it maybe shortened the season. I can't remember exactly what happened. You never heard of this guy once the NHL hired him. And I don't know whatever came of it. I don't know if he's still employed by the NHL. I know it was just like a side thing for, it's not like whatever he was doing, he stopped doing it to go work for the NHL. But they brought him in. It was kind of a big deal. And then it was nothing. It was crickets. So it's like, even when they're trying to do something, they don't do anything with it after the fact. You didn't hear a thing out of that. So do they have to do things like that? Do they have to, even though nothing came of that, do they have to, who's one of the biggest hockey fans is Justin Bieber. And I am not a Justin Bieber fan by any, like he's
Canadian.
He's Canadian. He's a pretty darn good hockey player. If you watch him skate.
Really?
Yeah. Why they wouldn't just go, like, he's a big Maple Leafs fan. Why they wouldn't go to him and just be like, dude, we need you. I don't know. Like, so where do they go? I mean, if they're not, they can throw all these things out there, but they don't have the people behind it to say like, yes, this is.
Yeah, they need like a Super Bowl halftime type deal.
Something.
I mean, yeah, like, it's interesting because I think things the NHL can do and things the individual teams can do and also, like, the broadcasts have their own autonomy as well. So there's like all these different elements. I think the best thing that the NHL obviously have to figure out to whom they are marketing.
Yeah.
And I can't even figure out what the answer to that is. Like, what they, like, looking at them and going, okay, what are you actually trying to achieve? Because there are some things they do that I think are really good. Like, what's that YouTube series they do? It's called like Weird NHL or something, where they have all the, like, they release one every few months and it's all like the funny clips and stuff.
Yeah.
Those videos are sick.
Yep.
Like, that stuff is so funny and that's landing like really well with the audience that they probably want. I suspect that they're torn between marketing to an audience that essentially is a potential audience, and it would be a gamble because they're like, we want to get this audience, but if it doesn't work, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
And not alienating the older generation.
Sure.
Like, I suspect that is where they're stuck. And I can understand that. And I don't believe in like completely discounting the older fans. It's not like I'm sat here being like, yeah, screw what they want.
Right.
Because no, not at all. But I feel like they're being too pussyfooted about it, and like they're not, they're just, I don't know. And it's just like, you have, I don't know. They do they do stuff on like TikTok and stuff like that. So, but again, I just think there has to be.
You need to embrace it more, really. They're not really.
Yeah, there has to be like definitely player specific stuff as well. Like, I think leaning into getting people engaged in the individual players. I mean, that's an interesting thing with esports, is that one of the biggest differences that people note a lot between esports and traditional sports is that in esports, people are not loyal to the teams, they're loyal to the players.
Really?
So yeah, very much so. So like, if your favorite player transfers from team A to team B, those people are going with them. And you do get franchise players for that reason, but the kind of like contract lengths that you have in esports are nothing like what you have in traditional sports. So people might be contracted for a year, maybe 2 if you're really like going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have like, really long contracts, like up to 10-year contracts and stuff like that,
wow,
in sports, like I think that you kind of have less of an excuse to not embrace advertising the players more, because like let's say you're the oil. I mean, I was going to use McDavid as the example, and he's probably not the best one because he is in and of himself a walking advertisement. But like, whatever, pick whatever team that has like a player that has a long contract. And it's like, okay, cool, yeah. If they leave, then we're not their fandom's going with them, but we have them for a really long time. We can embrace that, market it really well, and also try and gain loyalty from those people, and also make it like an environment where, because we are making them more valuable, they're also going to want to stay with us as well. Right. But again, like that's not the NHL's doing. That would be the individual teams doing.
Yeah.
But with the NHL specifically, like, I don't know. I feel like there have been things over the last couple of years where they've just seemed out of touch or disinterested. I don't know if it's really a route we want to go down, but there have definitely been like scandals that haven't helped.
No, exactly.
Where I think like from a PR perspective, it just really doesn't, look great. And it's crazy because like I feel like hockey is so palatable for a younger generation because it's so fast and physical. Actually on that graphic that you were just referencing, like one of the sports that has that's more popular amongst Gen Z than it was amongst all adults is the UFC. And I think that's like a really good example, right? Is like I know so many people my age, I'm 27. I know so many people my age and younger who love martial arts, like UFC, they love anything MMA, stuff like that. It's not really for me, but like that is something that's just taken off in my generation compared to the generation above me. I'm not Gen Z. I'm the last of the millennials, but I'm close enough to Gen Z that I was born in the final millennial year, and I will hold on to that until my dying breath.
Don't miscategorize me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm close to enough people from Gen Z that I can see it, and it's like that. Actually, the appeal in UFC is really not that crazy different to hockey, I think. And I mean, actually, a really good sport to reference would be wrestling. Like wrestling, everything's kayfabe, right? Like it's all fake, it's all stories, and that's what people love. People love the drama and stuff. I saw something recently that said, what was it? It was like wrestling is like a man's version of like a soap opera. It's like that, and that's why people love it. Because instead of having like, I don't know, rom-com storylines, you've got people will just beat each other up to resolve their differences. And I feel like hockey's not that different. And the funny thing as well is I have seen over the years, even before I got into hockey, there is a growing fandom of like young women who are really into hockey. And they have like Twitter accounts where they've got like their profile photos, like their favorite player. And it's like how I remember when I was a teenager, people would talk about certain TV shows and they would all have their favorites, and it's like, I don't see that for football. I don't see that for basketball or baseball, but hockey, it's everywhere.
I think, I don't know when it might have been like right before the Stanley Cup. Gary Bettman did like a press conference and released a bunch of information, and the percentages from men to women who watch hockey is 60 to 40. So it's 60%. So every
That's
4
insane.
out of 10 women, 4 out of 10
4 out of 10
fans
people
that are watching are women.
That's insane.
So it's a lot closer than you're right, than most of your other sports. Because I don't think it's anywhere near that in football. I don't think it's anywhere near that in basketball. Definitely not baseball. So I mean, they have a large demographic that they can reach, but it's just they're failing in getting it to the people. Now, the last thing I want to get to with you is maybe the thing that would just absolutely crush it, and which is co-hosting. We know that this works. We've seen it working, and the ESPN is put this under their wing with things like the Manning cast for the Monday Night Football games, where Peyton and Eli Manning they're just watching the Monday Night Football game, and they have guest hosts come on, and they just while they're watching the game.
Steve
It's
Dangle
Twitch.
started doing it in hockey, right?
Dangle did it, yeah. And the thing, like, well, with him is like they gave him the rights to do that.
Yeah.
So you have to. I mean, if you don't have the rights to do it, you can still do it. You just can't show the video.
Yeah, it's the same in esports. Like you can't just do it.
Right.
You have to have the rights to do it.
Exactly. But having the rights just makes it that much better, because if you don't have the rights, it's just you see my face, and hopefully we're watching at the same time, because with streaming,
what people try and do is they will just have the clock,
like the score,
so you can sync you can sync your own stream to that.
Okay. All right. But this is, I mean, people would eat this up. And it's obviously working. Twitch is a $1 billion company, because we just like watching people play games and watch other games. Are they going to go down this, or should they go down this? Like, where's the reason? What's the reason why they shouldn't? There isn't one. So, kind of expand upon what you were saying in your video.
There isn't one in terms of the benefit it would have for the NHL, but there is a very compelling reason not to do it for the broadcast companies that pay a metric crap ton of money to have broadcast rights. And that is the biggest revenue driver in sports. So that's where they would run into a roadblock. So actually what you mentioned about ESPN being the ones who have this kind of co-streaming thing going on with the Mannings is that is an interesting one, because that is ESPN who have invited them on. So it's still an ESPN product.
Right.
And so ESPN having the broadcast rights to whatever, they still kind of have control of that and benefit from that. But what I think people really like is being able to see people in their own environment. Let's say I'm Tom Brady watching a Patriots game, assuming he ever actually retires and doesn't go back. I'm watching a Patriots game and I'm sat in my own living room, right? And it's just and it's that one-to-one relationship. That is what people go nuts for. But that's not quite the same as Tom Brady being suited up on a broadcast and working for, whoever.
Okay.
And that, if you look at any co-stream, as we call them, in esports, they're all people at home at their own setup. So if I'm doing it, and I've done plenty of co-streaming before, I will literally be here. And I can sit in my pajamas like I am today. I can do whatever. And it's about that what people really crave from content these days is a relatability factor and a personal connection. And it especially goes down really well when it's someone that people trust and are invested in. So, ex-players is a really good one. And then, we mentioned Steve Dangle. Has Nasha ever done that? Because I would imagine he would also be a really good person to do that. If he started doing CBJ co-streams, and especially he has quite a young audience, right? So great, that would be such an easy way of just getting straight into them. Yeah, and people go crazy for that sort of thing.
Yeah. But do you think that and what you mentioned is very real. It's the the broadcasting rights, and it's a lot of money that these regional sports networks put in. But do you feel like there is some I don't know if they would get some kickback or something like that, or it would just benefit them in the long run, because maybe people would be turned on to say it was altitude, right? And if somewhere on the other side of the country, people are co-hosting or co-streaming, and people are being able to see those guys at altitude who do a phenomenal job. You were talking earlier about how the Oilers guys have a lot of fun. The altitude guys are hilarious.
Well, it's generally when co-streaming, everything's muted. So even if I'm on let's say I'm co-streaming at home and I'm watching the altitude broadcast, I'll be talking over them. You might see them on screen, but you won't hear them. So it's not the people who are watching me are there to see me talk. They're not there to see them talk.
Sure.
So there isn't really those people aren't necessarily going to be oh wow, yeah, these guys are really funny, because how would they know that?
So
they're not listening to them. You know,
there's no residual.
so
It's not like people
yeah,
are gonna go seek out and then go get a subscription to Altitude because I
yeah.
watched it on a co-stream and they looked pretty fun. So
But
I
that's
get
where I
that.
think, like, you know, there are certain avenues potentially for like partner relationships. So, for
Right.
example, in esports, there are a lot of like streamers and content creators who will be what we say is signed to an org. So if you an org is a team, like a team owner. So for example, let's say the Avs had content creators working under their banner, right? But what you could maybe consider in something like this would be content creators signed to a broadcast network. So
Mhm.
if like ESPN were partnered with whatever content creator, whether it's a content creator or whether it's an ex-player who's doing content on their behalf, like whatever it is. And so they could be doing co-streaming, but it would be under like the
Right.
ESPN banner, even if it were on their own channel or whatever. So it's still part of their product. It's still a marketing investment essentially from them.
Gotcha.
Now, obviously, I don't know how the accounts would balance out, like if that would be a worthwhile investment, but it's everywhere in
Mhm.
esports. So
Hmm.
because people know the content sells.
Yeah.
So and actually in a lot of cases, just because of how expensive it is to pay players, um, oftentimes signing content creators is one of the only ways to actually make a profit in
Hmm.
for esports organizations. So that would maybe be like an interesting like route to explore because
Yeah.
then you're not alienating the biggest money generators in the business.
Mhm.
You're still using them, you're advertising them, but you're also benefiting from co-streaming and, you know, bringing new people in using the content sort of like thing that works for a lot of people in that they feel like they have an actual relationship with the person,
Yeah.
they become a lot more invested in it. And yeah, and especially if you've got people like ex pros and whatever who want to be a part of that. You know, that's
Hmm.
something that people feel very drawn to because they already feel like they have a connection or there's a credibility there,
Right.
whatever it may be.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we could go down this road for, and maybe we will. Maybe we will if you're open to doing this again, because I'm sure
Oh
we
yeah.
there's a lot more that we can discuss as the
Mhm.
season is going on. How Vancouver is doing so far during the year. Maybe
Well, they have
after
they at
point.
least they have a captain now, so there's that.
Yeah. Okay. I guess things are looking up there then, right? Because they have a
You got to
captain. So.
take what you can with this team.
All right. Well, we'll stop it there. But like I said, I think if like you're open to it, we'll have you back on and we'll just keep this conversation and we'll
Yeah,
we'll,
that
we'll
sounds
see how
good.
things are going. You know what I mean? Like, have they done anything to address any of these things we're talking about
Mhm.
and what's the future look like? So,
Yeah.
why don't you throw out there where people can follow you and maybe what's up next for you, if anything fun?
All right. Well, obviously, if you're watching, you see my Twitter is there. It's just at geometric.
Mhm.
Um, and I think all of my other links are available from there. The YouTube channel where this video is that we've been discussing is just youtube.com/Geo Collins.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can find everything from those links. What's next for me? Well, I just got back from the US. I'm about to go to Sweden to work on the GeoGuessr World Championships, which sounds so lame, but I'm so excited. It's gonna be so good.
What is it? It's
And
the what?
Do you know what GeoGuessr is? Oh
I
my
don't know.
god, it's
I
one of the
know. I
best
know.
games ever. So it's basically
Okay.
it's an online, like you could just get it up on your browser, and it's
Okay.
basically a game where the basic premise is that it will put you anywhere in the world on Street View, and you have to click on a map where you are, right? And you have to
Okay.
right, and so you can get max 5,000 points for each round, and there's 5 rounds. But there are so many different maps, so you could be like, I'm gonna do the New York map, or
Right.
I'm gonna do the whatever map. Like there are so many different ones. You could do one that would be like NHL stadiums, right? You could probably do that.
Really?
So yeah, but they're having a world championship in Sweden at the beginning of October. So I'm gonna be going there
That's
for
all
that.
right. I'm interested now. That I
Oh,
like stuff
it's
like
so
that.
addictive. I
All
love
right.
that game so much.
And it's free to
So
play, or is it
yeah,
is it
yeah.
really?
It's free to play. You can subscribe to it that will let you kind of like play it more, but
Okay.
that you can play it for free. Yeah.
For free. Okay. All right. I have to tune into that. All
Yeah,
right.
it's super good.
All right, everybody. That's going to wrap it up for today. Definitely comment away in the comment section on anything that we talked about today and any other avenues you think the Avalanche or the league could go down to help reach a broader audience. It's a never-ending debate. So, all right, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you for tuning in, making it your first listen of the day. Geo, thank you again so much for
Been an
doing
honor.
this. All right, everyone. Enjoy your day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully, Kyle's internet is working by then.